I woke up in the recovery room with one less kidney and what I thought was a stronger marriage. 2 months later, I woke up to divorce papers on my nightstand and the sound of my husband loading boxes into a moving truck. The kidney I gave him was still functioning perfectly. Our marriage was dead. But when my 16-year-old daughter walked into my bedroom that morning and said, "Mom, I need to show you something on his laptop," I had no idea she'd already started building the case that would destroy him. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The scar on my left side was still pink and tender when Brian handed me the envelope. I was folding laundry in our bedroom, the same bedroom where he'd held my hand the night before my surgery and promised me forever. The envelope was thin, official looking, the kind that carries bad news in expensive paper. "What's this?" I asked, setting down one of his dress shirts. "Just open it, Lisa." His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was asking me to sign for a package. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out the documents. The words blurred together at first. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. My name printed in cold, legal typeface next to his. "Brian, what is this? Is this some kind of sick joke?" He was already pulling clothes from his dresser, folding them with care into a suitcase I didn't recognize. A new suitcase. He'd bought a new suitcase and I hadn't even noticed. "It's not a joke. I've been unhappy for a long time, Lisa. I stayed because I needed the transplant, but now that I'm healthy again, I can finally live my life." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward, my hip catching the edge of the dresser. He needed the transplant. Past tense. Like it was a car repair he'd been putting off. "You stayed because you needed my kidney?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Don't make this dramatic. We haven't been happy in years. You know that." But I didn't know that. 3 months ago, we'd celebrated our 19th anniversary at Antonio's Italian kitchen. He'd ordered my favorite wine and told me I was the most selfless person he'd ever known. 6 weeks ago, I'd been wheeled into surgery at Riverside Medical Center, terrified but determined to save his life. 4 weeks ago, he'd kissed my surgical scar and called me his hero. "Where are you going?" I managed to ask. "I've rented a place downtown. The Bridgewater Apartments. My lawyer will be in touch about the house and assets." "Your lawyer?" "Brian, we can talk about this. If you're unhappy, we can go to counseling. We can figure this out." He zipped the suitcase with a finality that made my chest ache. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were those of a stranger. Cold. Impatient. Already gone. "There's nothing to figure out. I want a divorce. Sign the papers, Lisa. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I heard footsteps on the stairs. Natalie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her long brown hair tangled from sleep. She looked from her father to me, taking in the suitcase, the papers in my shaking hands, the tears streaming down my face. "Dad? What's going on?" "I'm moving out, sweetheart. Your mom and I are getting a divorce." He said it so casually, like he was announcing a change in dinner plans. Natalie's face went pale. "But Mom just gave you her kidney. She's still recovering. You said we were a team. You said we'd get through this together. Things change, Natalie. You'll understand when you're older." He picked up his suitcase and walked past both of us without another word. I heard him go down the stairs, heard the front door open and close, heard his car start in the driveway. Then he was gone, and I was standing in our bedroom with our daughter, trying to understand how the man whose life I'd saved had just walked away. Natalie wrapped her arms around me, and I realized she was taller than me now. When had that happened? When had my little girl grown up while I wasn't paying attention? "Mom, are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I was holding divorce papers from a man I'd literally given part of my body to save. But I looked at my daughter's frightened face and lied. I'll be fine, honey. We'll be fine. The first week after Brian left felt like living underwater. Everything was muffled and slow and I couldn't quite catch my breath. I'd wake up reaching for him, forgetting for those first few seconds that he was gone, that he'd chosen to leave, that I was alone. Then the reality would crash over me again and I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, my hand resting on the scar he'd kissed goodbye. I called in sick to my job at the library. Paula from the circulation desk brought me casseroles I couldn't eat and sat with me while I cried. My sister Chris drove up from Salem and tried to convince me to call a lawyer, but I couldn't seem to make my brain work that way yet. Legal action felt impossible when I was still trying to process that this was actually happening. The medical bills started arriving that second week. $47,000 for the donor surgery and recovery care. Insurance had covered Brian's transplant recipient costs completely, but my policy classified the donation as elective surgery. Brian had promised to cover all my medical expenses. He'd signed papers at the hospital promising exactly that. But when I called his new number at the Bridgewater Apartments, he didn't answer. When I texted, he replied with a single line through his lawyer's assistant. All financial matters to be resolved in divorce proceedings. I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by bills I couldn't pay, staring at my savings account on my laptop. Brian had been the primary account holder. The balance showed $312. Our joint savings, which had held $93,000 2 weeks ago, was empty. Completely empty. Natalie's college fund, which we'd been building since she was born, showed a balance of $0. I called the bank. The transfer had been authorized 5 days before he served me the papers. 5 days. While I was still taking pain medication and sleeping 16 hours a day, my husband had been systematically emptying our accounts. Mom? Natalie's voice made me jump. I closed the laptop quickly, but not before she saw the screen. Is the money gone? There was no point in lying to her. She was 16, smart, observant. She'd figure it out eventually anyway. Your father transferred it before he left. All of it? Even my college fund? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Natalie pulled out the chair across from me and sat down slowly. Her face was calm, too calm, the same expression she got when she was working through a complicated problem for her AP calculus class. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Did Dad plan this? The whole thing? Did he know he was going to leave you after the surgery? The question cut right to the wound I'd been avoiding. I'd been telling myself that Brian had just panicked, that he'd gotten scared or confused or overwhelmed. But Natalie was asking the thing I was terrified to consider. I don't know, honey. Because if he did plan it, that means he manipulated you into giving him your kidney when he was already planning to abandon you. That means he committed fraud. And if he committed fraud, there are legal consequences. I stared at my daughter. She sounded like a lawyer, not a high school junior. Natalie, where is this coming from? She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where Brian used to park his car. When she turned back to me, her jaw was set in a way that reminded me eerily of her father. I've been paying attention, Mom. More than you think. I noticed things. What kind of things? His laptop. He leaves it open sometimes when he thinks no one's looking. I saw emails. My stomach dropped. What kind of emails? Emails to Vanessa. Vanessa Hartley. Brian's physical therapist from his post-surgery recovery sessions. She'd come to our house 3 times a week for the first month after the transplant, helping Brian rebuild his strength. She was young, maybe 30, with the kind of effortless fitness that came from actually enjoying exercise. I'd made her coffee and thanked her for taking such good care of my husband. What did the email say? Natalie pulled her phone from her pocket and opened it. She'd taken screenshots. Dozens of them. She handed me the phone, and I scrolled through messages that made me feel physically sick. The earliest one was dated 2 weeks before my surgery. Brian telling Vanessa that he just needed to get through the transplant, that once he was healthy they could finally be together. Vanessa responding that she understood, that she'd wait for him, that what they had was worth waiting for. Messages during my recovery. Brian texting Vanessa from our bedroom while I slept off pain medication, telling her he couldn't wait to leave, that counting down the days was torture. Messages from the week before he served me papers. Brian and Vanessa looking at apartments together. Planning their future. Discussing how to handle me, how to maximize what he could take from the marriage, how to minimize what he'd owe. I handed the phone back to Natalie with shaking hands. How long have you known about this? About Vanessa? 3 weeks. About him planning to leave? Since right before your surgery. You knew before the surgery? Natalie, why didn't you tell me? Because you needed to save his life, Mom. You're a perfect match. 6 out of 6 antigens. The transplant coordinator said that almost never happens with non-relatives. If you hadn't donated, Dad would have stayed on the transplant list for years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He might have died. She said it so matter-of-factly, but I heard the pain underneath. So I let you donate your kidney to save him, and then I watched him destroy you. And I documented everything. What do you mean, documented? Natalie pulled her laptop from her backpack. She opened it and turned it toward me. The screen showed a folder structure that looked like something from a legal investigation. Subfolders labeled financial records, communication evidence, timeline documentation, medical records, and witness statements. Natalie, what is all this? It's everything we need to prove what Dad did. He didn't just leave you, Mom. He committed donor fraud. He manipulated you into major surgery under false pretenses. And depending on what we find, there might be other charges too. I clicked through the folders, my mind reeling. Bank statements showing the exact timeline of transfers. Screenshots of emails between Brian and Vanessa spanning back 6 months. Photos of them together that Natalie had somehow obtained. Medical documents from the hospital. A detailed timeline cross-referencing Brian's promises to me against his messages to Vanessa. How did you get all of this? Dad's not careful with his passwords. He uses the same one for everything, a variation on his birthday and our address. I've had access to his email and cloud storage for months. Natalie, that's hacking. That's illegal. She closed the laptop and looked at me with an expression far older than 16. So is donor fraud. So is financial elder abuse. So is abandoning your spouse immediately after they donate an organ to you. Want to compare which crimes are worse? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. Because she was right. What Brian had done wasn't just morally reprehensible. It might actually be criminal. What do you want to do with all this information? I asked carefully. I want to make sure he doesn't get away with it. I want to make sure everyone knows what kind of person uses someone's love to manipulate them into surgery and then abandons them. And I want to make sure he pays for what he did to you. There was steel in her voice, determination I'd never heard before. This wasn't my little girl anymore. This was someone who'd been shaped by watching her father betray her mother in the most calculated way possible. Mom, I need to show you something else. She opened a different folder, this one labeled Current Activity. Inside were recent screenshots, all from the past week. Dad got remarried yesterday. The room tilted. What? He and Vanessa got married at the county courthouse. 6 days after he served you papers. They're not even trying to hide it. She showed me the marriage certificate she'd somehow obtained. Brian Michael Morrison and Vanessa Marie Hartley. Married May 28, 8 weeks and 3 days after he'd received my kidney. There's more. They bought a house together. Another document. A mortgage application for a property in the Riverside Hills subdivision. Purchase price of $420,000. Down payment of $90,000. I didn't need to ask where that down payment had come from. I was staring at our life savings being used to buy a house for my husband and his new wife. The mortgage application was submitted while you were still in the hospital recovering, Mom. He used your income information to qualify for a better rate, but he didn't put your name on the deed. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's fraud. I couldn't speak. Couldn't think. The man I'd been married to for 19 years, the man whose life I'd saved by giving him part of my body, had been planning this entire betrayal before I'd even gone into surgery. He'd held my hand and called me his hero while already knowing he was going to take everything and leave me with medical debt and an empty bank account. Mom, I know this is a lot. But I need you to listen to me. I looked at my daughter through tears. I didn't remember starting to cry. Dad thinks he won. He thinks he outsmarted everyone. He thinks he gets to walk away clean with Vanessa and the house and all the money, and you just have to accept it because you're too broken and too poor to fight back. I am too broken and too poor to fight back. No, you're not. Because you have me. And I have all of this. She gestured to the laptop with all its folders full of damning evidence. I've been preparing for this since before your surgery. I knew what he was planning, and I've been building the case against him piece by piece. Every email he thought was private. Every financial transaction he thought I wouldn't notice. Every lie he told while you were recovering from surgery. I have all of it, Mom. And I know exactly what to do with it. Natalie, you're 16 years old. You can't take on your father in a legal battle. I'm not taking him on in a legal battle. I'm going to destroy his entire life, and he's never going to see it coming. The way she said it, calm and certain and completely serious, sent chills down my spine. What are you planning? She opened one more folder. This one was labeled Phase 1 Implementation. Inside were documents I didn't understand at first. Reports filed with medical ethics boards. Anonymous tips sent to Brian's employer. Complaints submitted to the State Transplant Authority. Evidence packages prepared for law enforcement. I started filing reports 3 days ago. The State Medical Board opened an investigation yesterday into whether Dad committed donor fraud. His employer received an anonymous tip about the mortgage fraud this morning. And I sent a complete evidence package to an investigative journalist at Channel 5 News who specializes in medical ethics stories. Natalie, what have you done? I protected us, Mom. Because someone had to. I sat there looking at my daughter, this person I thought I knew, and realized I had no idea who she'd become. Or maybe I did know. Maybe she'd become exactly what she needed to be to survive in a world where even your own father could betray you so completely. When do we tell your father that you know about all of this? I asked. Natalie smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. We don't tell him anything. We let him think he's safe. We let him think he got away with it. And we watch while his whole world collapses around him, one piece at a time. That's cruel, Natalie. So is manipulating someone into donating a kidney and then abandoning them with medical debt and an empty bank account. At least my version has justice. She closed her laptop and stood up. I have homework to finish. But Mom, one more thing. What? Dad called me yesterday. He wants me to meet Vanessa officially. He wants me to come to dinner at their new house and see their new life together. My heart broke all over again. He was already trying to fold our daughter into his new family, like I could just be erased and replaced. What did you tell him? I told him I'd love to come to dinner. That I'm really happy for him. That I can't wait to get to know Vanessa better. Natalie. I need him to trust me, Mom. I need him to think I'm on his side. Because the more he trusts me, the more access I have. And the more access I have, the more damage I can do. She kissed the top of my head like I was the child and she was the parent. Don't worry. I've got this handled. Then she was gone, heading upstairs to her room, leaving me alone with the knowledge that my 16-year-old daughter had been waging a secret war against her father for weeks. And she was winning. The sound of Natalie's typing became the soundtrack to my sleepless nights. It would start around 10 in the evening, a steady rhythm of keys clicking in her bedroom down the hall, and continue until well past midnight. Sometimes I'd wake at 3 in the morning and hear it still going, relentless and purposeful. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, my hand unconsciously moving to the scar on my side. The incision had healed cleanly, the surgeon had said. No complications. A textbook recovery. But recovery from what? From saving the life of a man who'd been planning to destroy mine? Chris called every morning, checking on me with the careful tone people use around the recently bereaved. In a way, I was bereaved. The man I'd thought I married had never existed. I'd been in love with a fiction for 19 years. You need to get angry, Lisa, she said during one of her daily check-ins. You need to stop crying and start fighting. But I couldn't seem to access anger. There was just this vast emptiness where my life used to be, and underneath it, a guilt I couldn't name. Had I missed signs? Had I been a bad wife? Had I somehow driven Brian into Vanessa's arms? Stop that, Paula said when I voiced these thoughts during one of her casserole deliveries. She set down a tray of lasagna with more force than necessary. Stop making his choices your fault. He's the one who lied. He's the one who manipulated you into major surgery. He's the one who stole your money and married his mistress before your surgical staples were even removed. She was right. Intellectually, I knew she was right. But emotionally, I felt like I was drowning. Work became my refuge. I returned to the library after 3 weeks, moving slowly through the stacks, shelving books in the children's section where things were simple and stories always had clear heroes and villains. Real life was messier. Real life gave you villains who kissed your surgical scars and called you their hero while planning their escape. It was during one of my shifts that I noticed something odd. A man in an expensive suit had been sitting in the reading area for over an hour, not reading, just watching me. When I finally made eye contact, he stood and walked over. Lisa Morrison? Yes? He handed me a business card. Gregory Foster, attorney at law. The name was embossed in gold lettering. I'd like to speak with you about your recent divorce proceedings, if you have a moment. My stomach clenched. Did Brian send you? No, ma'am. I was contacted by someone who believes you may need legal representation. Someone who provided me with substantial documentation suggesting your husband may have committed several serious crimes. I didn't need to ask who had contacted him. My daughter. I can neither confirm nor deny who my source was. But I can tell you that the evidence I've reviewed is compelling enough that I'm willing to represent you pro bono until we secure compensation from your ex-husband's assets. Pro bono? Why would you do that? Gregory Foster smiled slightly. Because the case your source built is airtight. Because what your husband did is unconscionable. And because when we win, the settlement will be substantial enough to cover my fees and then some. Consider it an investment in justice. He laid out a folder on the circulation desk. Inside were legal documents, medical ethics complaints, financial fraud reports. Everything Natalie had compiled, now translated into official legal language. Your husband engaged in what we call living donor fraud. He solicited an organ donation under false pretenses, with premeditated intent to abandon the donor immediately post-recovery. In Oregon, this falls under a gray area of the law, but we have precedent from similar cases in other states. Additionally, he committed mortgage fraud by using your income to qualify for a loan without your knowledge or consent. He emptied joint accounts without notification. He failed to disclose his intent to divorce before accepting your organ donation. Gregory's finger moved down the page, pointing to each charge. We can pursue civil damages for medical expenses, emotional distress, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. We can file complaints with the state medical board and the transplant authority. We can request the court freeze all assets acquired with marital funds. And if the district attorney is interested, which I believe they will be, criminal charges could follow. I stared at the documents, feeling dizzy. Criminal charges? Fraud. Possibly extortion, depending on how the DA interprets the organ donation coercion. Financial elder abuse might apply given the medical vulnerability. These are serious crimes, Mrs. Morrison. I'm not an elder. I'm 43. In legal terms, someone recovering from major surgery and under the influence of prescription pain medication can be classified as temporarily vulnerable, which triggers certain protections. Your husband made major financial decisions affecting your assets while you were in that vulnerable state. It was too much to process. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. I need to think about this. Of course. But Mrs. Morrison, time is a factor. Your husband is currently restructuring his assets. The longer we wait, the harder it becomes to recover what he took. He's counting on you being too overwhelmed to fight back. That night, I confronted Natalie in her room. She was at her desk, laptop open, surrounded by papers and sticky notes covered in her neat handwriting. You contacted a lawyer without telling me. She didn't look up from her screen. You weren't going to do it yourself. That's not your decision to make, Natalie. I'm the adult here. Then start acting like one. The words were sharp, cutting. She finally turned to face me, and I saw frustration in her eyes. Mom, I love you. But you've been walking around like a ghost for weeks. You cry yourself to sleep every night. You've lost 12 pounds because you barely eat. You jump every time your phone rings hoping it's Dad calling to say he made a mistake. I don't do that. Yes, you do. I hear you check your phone 20 times a day. I see you looking at old photos. I watched you smell his cologne that's still in the bathroom cabinet. Tears burned my eyes because she was right about all of it. He destroyed you, Mom. And while you're busy being destroyed, he's living in a house bought with your money, married to his mistress, going to work every day like nothing happened. Someone has to fight back. Since you won't do it, I will. By spying on your own father? By building legal cases like you're some kind of teenage prosecutor? By protecting us. By making sure he doesn't get away with what he did. She stood up and pulled something from her desk drawer. A notebook, spiral-bound, every page filled with her handwriting. Do you know what this is? It's a journal I started keeping 2 months before your surgery. Every time Dad said something that didn't add up. Every time I caught him texting someone and smiling in a way he never smiled at you. Every weird phone call he took in his car. Every night he came home late claiming work emergencies. She flipped through pages covered in dates, times, observations. March 3rd. Dad told you he had a late meeting, but I saw him at Cedar Grove Cafe with a blonde woman. They were holding hands. March 10th. Dad told you his phone was broken, but I heard it buzzing in his jacket pocket. When I checked later, he deleted all his recent messages. March 14th. The day before your surgery. Dad spent an hour in his car talking to someone. I heard him say, just a few more months and we can be together. My throat tightened. You knew all this before the surgery? I suspected. I didn't have proof yet. And what was I supposed to do? Tell you the day before you were supposed to save his life? Let him die because he was planning to leave you? Yes. You should have told me. Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was being a dramatic teenager trying to cause problems? I wanted to say I would have believed her. But I wasn't sure that was true. 2 months ago, I'd been convinced Brian and I were solid. I dismissed my own suspicions dozens of times, explaining away the distance between us as stress from his illness. After the surgery, I kept watching, Natalie continued. I taught myself how to recover deleted messages. I learned about digital forensics from YouTube tutorials. I figured out his passwords and monitored his email. And I documented everything, Mom. Every single thing he did wrong. She opened her laptop and showed me a spreadsheet that made my head spin. Dates, times, communications, financial transactions, all cross-referenced and color-coded. This is insane, Natalie. This is obsessive. This is thorough. There's a difference. You're 16 years old. You should be worried about grades and prom dates, not building fraud cases against your father. Well, my father shouldn't have committed fraud. Funny how his choices became my problem. She closed the laptop and faced me squarely. I'm not going to apologize for protecting you. I'm not going to feel bad for making sure there are consequences. And I'm not going to stop. What does that mean? It means I'm just getting started. The next morning, I met with Gregory Foster at his office downtown. The law firm occupied the top floor of a building with views of the Willamette River. Everything was glass and chrome and expensive-looking furniture that I was afraid to sit on. Gregory spread documents across the conference table between us. I filed a motion to freeze all assets acquired with marital funds pending the divorce settlement. That includes the house your husband purchased with Vanessa. I've also filed complaints with the Oregon Medical Board regarding potential donor fraud, and I've notified the transplant coordinator at Riverside Medical Center of possible ethical violations. What will that do? The asset freeze means Brian can't sell, refinance, or transfer ownership of the house without court approval. The medical complaints trigger investigations that could result in sanctions, fines, or criminal referral. At minimum, it creates a paper trail establishing that his behavior was predatory. He pulled up another document. I've also prepared a civil suit seeking damages for medical expenses, emotional distress, and fraud. We're asking for full compensation for your $47,000 in medical bills, return of all marital assets including the $93,000 he transferred, your daughter's $62,000 college fund, and punitive damages of $500,000. $500,000? That's insane. That's consequences. He stole your kidney through fraud, Mrs. Morrison. In other contexts, organ trafficking cases have resulted in multi-million-dollar judgments. $500,000 is actually conservative. I stared at the numbers on the page, trying to imagine Brian's reaction when he received these papers. He's going to fight this. Of course he will. But we have something he doesn't expect. What's that? Evidence. Substantial, documented, time-stamped evidence of premeditation. Most divorce cases are he said she said. This one is he said. Here's his email admitting everything. Gregory leaned back in his chair. I've been practicing family law for 23 years. I've never seen documentation this thorough. Whoever compiled this evidence knew exactly what they were doing. My daughter compiled it. Then your daughter has a future in law if she wants it. This is better work than I've seen from most private investigators. He paused, studying my face. Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask you something directly. Are you prepared for how ugly this is going to get? Because once we file these motions, Brian is going to realize you're not going quietly. He's going to hire aggressive attorneys. He's going to claim you're vindictive, that you're lying, that you're using the divorce to punish him. He's going to try to turn your daughter against you. He already married his mistress. How much uglier can it get? Much uglier. Trust me. I signed the papers authorizing Gregory to proceed. My hands shook, but I signed. That evening, Natalie came home from school and dropped her backpack by the door with her usual routine. But something was different. She was smiling. Good news? The state medical board opened a formal investigation into Dad. They sent him notification today. How do you know that? She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. An email from the Oregon Medical Board to Brian Morrison, informing him of complaint number 2024-0847 regarding potential living donor fraud. Natalie, how did you get his email? I told you, Mom. I have access to everything. That's hacking. That's illegal. So is donor fraud. Want to keep comparing crimes? She sat down at the kitchen table and pulled homework from her backpack like this was a normal afternoon, like she hadn't just admitted to actively monitoring her father's private communications. There's something else you should know. Dad called me today. My stomach dropped. What did he say? He wanted to know if I'd said anything to anyone about him and Vanessa. He was trying to sound casual, but I could tell he was worried. I think he knows something's happening, but he doesn't know what yet. What did you tell him? I told him I hadn't talked to anyone. That I understood why he needed to leave. That I was happy he found someone who made him happy. The casual way she lied to her own father was chilling. He invited me to dinner again this weekend. He really wants me to bond with Vanessa. I think he's trying to create this narrative where everything's fine, where we're all just moving forward like a normal blended family. Are you going to go? Absolutely. I need to see the house. I need to document what he bought with our money. And I want to get a feel for how confident he is, how much he thinks he's gotten away with. Natalie, this is too much. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm not playing anything. I'm executing a plan. She looked up from her math homework, her expression serious. Dad thinks he's smarter than everyone. He thinks he manipulated you perfectly, stole everything cleanly, and now he gets to ride off into the sunset with his new wife and his new house and no consequences. But he made one massive mistake. What mistake? He underestimated us. He thought you'd be too heartbroken to fight and I'd be too young to understand. He forgot that you raised me to be strong and smart and that I'd been paying attention my whole life. She returned to her homework like the conversation was over. I went upstairs to my bedroom, to the bed I'd shared with Brian for 19 years, and I finally let myself feel something other than grief. I felt anger. Hot, clarifying anger at what he'd done. At the calculated cruelty of it. At the way he'd looked me in the eye and lied while I was recovering from surgery that I'd undergone to save his life. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it, my heart racing. It was a photo. Brian and Vanessa in front of their new house, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling. The message below read, "Living our best life. Hope you're doing well." He'd sent me a photo of himself with his new wife in front of the house he'd bought with my money. He'd actually done that. I forwarded the text to Gregory Foster without comment. Then I forwarded it to Natalie. Her response came immediately, "Perfect. Now we have evidence he's taunting you. That'll look great in court." I lay back on my bed and touched the scar on my side. This thin pink line that represented major surgery, weeks of recovery, a permanent change to my body. I'd given him this kidney freely, out of love, believing we were in it together. He'd taken it knowing he was leaving. For the first time since he'd walked out, I didn't cry. I got up, opened my laptop, and started reading through all the documents Gregory had sent me. Every filing, every complaint, every legal motion. I needed to understand exactly what we were doing to him. If Brian wanted war, he was going to get one. And this time, he was fighting an opponent he'd created himself by betraying the wrong woman's daughter. Natalie was right about one thing. He'd made a massive mistake. He'd underestimated both of us. The dinner invitation came on a Thursday. Brian texted Natalie directly, asking her to join him and Vanessa at their new place on Saturday evening. He wanted to show her around, wanted her to see how happy they were, wanted to start building their new family dynamic. Natalie showed me the text with that same calculating expression she'd been wearing for weeks. "I'm going to record everything," she said, already planning her approach. Oregon is a one-party consent state for recordings, which means I can legally record any conversation I'm part of. I'll wear my smartwatch. The audio quality is good enough for transcription. "Natalie, maybe you shouldn't go. This feels like it could backfire." "It won't backfire. I need to see what he's doing with our money. I need to document the house, the furnishings, everything he's purchased since he stole from us. And I need to hear what lies he's telling about you." She was right, of course. She was always right these days, which was both impressive and terrifying. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather. Natalie dressed carefully in jeans and a plain sweater, nothing that would suggest she was there for any purpose other than a casual family dinner. She hugged me before she left, and for just a moment she felt like my little girl again instead of this fierce strategist she'd become. "Text me if you need anything," I said. "If it gets uncomfortable, just leave." "I'll be fine, Mom." I've been preparing for this. She drove off in the used Honda we'd bought her for her 16th birthday, back when we were still a family and Brian was still pretending to be a decent human being. I watched her taillights disappear down Elm Creek Drive and felt my stomach twist with worry. The house was silent without her. I tried to distract myself with television, with reading, with anything that would stop me from checking my phone every 30 seconds. Paula called and offered to come over, but I told her I was fine. I wasn't fine. I was imagining dozens of scenarios where this dinner went wrong, where Brian realized what Natalie was doing, where everything fell apart. At 8:15, my phone buzzed. A text from Natalie with a single photo attached. The image showed a massive living room with vaulted ceilings, expensive leather furniture, and a stone fireplace that looked like it belonged in a resort. The caption read, $93,000 looks different when it's furniture instead of security. Another text came through. Kitchen has professional-grade appliances. Wine fridge stocked with bottles that cost more than my monthly allowance used to be. Then, Vanessa is wearing a necklace that Dad told her was a family heirloom. It was your grandmother's necklace, Mom. The one you kept in your jewelry box. My hands clenched around the phone. That necklace had been passed down through 3 generations. My grandmother had given it to me on my wedding day. Brian had known how much it meant to me. He'd taken it and given it to his new wife like it was just another thing he owned. The texts kept coming throughout the evening. Photos of the master bedroom with its king-sized bed and designer linens. The home office with Brian's diplomas on the wall, the same ones that used to hang in our house. The garage with 2 new cars, a BMW sedan and a Range Rover. At 9:30, Natalie called. I answered before the first ring finished. How did it go? Better than expected. Dad spent the whole dinner talking about his fresh start. How liberating it feels to finally be authentic. How he'd been living a lie for years and now he can finally breathe. He said that. He called our marriage a lie. In front of Vanessa, yeah. She kept touching his arm and saying how brave he was for leaving. How it takes courage to choose happiness. They're completely convinced they're the heroes of this story. I heard the anger underneath Natalie's controlled tone. Vanessa told me I was welcome anytime. That she hoped we could develop a relationship because she's always wanted a daughter. She actually said that, Mom. Like she's trying to replace you. Did you get the recordings? Every word. 3 hours of conversation where Dad repeatedly admits he was unhappy for years. Where he discusses financial decisions he made without consulting you. Where he talks about the house purchase timeline in a way that contradicts what he told the mortgage company. That's good, right? For the case? That's excellent for the case. He basically handed me a confession without realizing it. There was a pause, then Natalie's voice came back quieter, more vulnerable. Mom, there's something else. Something I need to tell you. My stomach clenched. What? They're planning a honeymoon. 3 weeks in Italy, leaving next month. The flights alone are $12,000. The hotels are another $20,000. They're spending our money, Mom. Your money. And they're not even trying to hide it. How do you know the costs? Dad left his laptop open while he went to the bathroom. I cloned his booking confirmation emails to my phone. Took about 15 seconds. Natalie. I know. Illegal. But also effective. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked slightly. Seeing them together, watching him be affectionate with her, hearing him talk about you like you were some burden he finally escaped, it made me realize something. What? He's not going to suddenly wake up and feel guilty. He's not going to have some moment of clarity where he realizes what he did was wrong. He genuinely believes he deserves this, that he earned it somehow. And that means we can't wait for him to develop a conscience. We have to make the consequences happen ourselves. I heard the steel return to her voice. Monday morning, I'm giving Gregory everything I recorded tonight. Every admission, every financial detail, every piece of evidence of him spending marital assets. And then we're going to watch his perfect new life start crumbling. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room of our house and thought about the man I'd been married to. Had he always been this person? Had I missed it for 19 years? Or had something changed in him when he got sick, when he realized his mortality and decided his happiness mattered more than his integrity? I'd never know. And maybe it didn't matter. What mattered now was making sure there were consequences. Sunday passed in tense anticipation. Natalie spent most of the day in her room, transcribing the recordings and organizing them into a supplemental evidence file. I could hear her voice through the door, dictating notes, matching timestamps to specific admissions. Monday morning, Gregory Foster called before I'd even finished my first coffee. "Mrs. Morrison, I just received a rather substantial evidence package from our mutual friend. I've been reviewing it since 5 this morning. Is it useful?" Useful doesn't begin to cover it. Your husband gave us impeachment material that would take most attorneys months to develop through depositions. We have him on record admitting the marriage was failing long before your surgery. We have him discussing asset purchases made with marital funds. We have him acknowledging he transferred money without your knowledge or consent. This is devastating material. What happens now? Now I file an emergency motion for immediate asset recovery based on fraudulent transfer. I'm also requesting the court order him to reimburse your medical expenses immediately, not as part of the final settlement but as an emergency interim measure. The recordings give us grounds to argue he's actively dissipating marital assets. Will it work? The judge is going to hear your husband, in his own words, admitting he planned to leave, talking about spending your joint savings, discussing expensive purchases made within weeks of abandoning you post-surgery. Unless Brian has the worst luck in judicial assignment, this should result in immediate freeze orders. That afternoon, while I was shelving returns at the library, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Lisa Morrison? A woman's voice, professional but with an edge of urgency. Yes? This is Kate Sullivan from Channel 5 News. I'm working on an investigative piece about living donor fraud and organ donation ethics. Your name came up in my research, and I was hoping we could talk. My heart started pounding. How did you get my name? I received an anonymous tip about your case. The documentation was extremely thorough. I've been investigating for 2 weeks now, confirming details, speaking with medical ethicists, consulting with legal experts. Mrs. Morrison, what happened to you represents a significant gap in organ donation safeguards. I don't want to be on the news. I understand. But your story could help change policy. Right now, there's virtually no protection for living donors who are defrauded or coerced. No screening for donor manipulation. No consequences for recipients who abandon donors immediately post-surgery. Your case could be the catalyst for reform. I thought about Natalie, working alone in her room, building this case piece by piece because the system had no mechanisms to protect people like me. What would it involve? An interview, if you're comfortable. We'd obscure your face and change your voice if you prefer anonymity. I'd also like to speak with medical professionals about your case, legal experts about the fraud allegations, and policymakers about potential legislative solutions. I need to think about it. Of course. But Mrs. Morrison, your ex-husband is currently telling people you agreed to an amicable divorce. He's portraying himself as someone who simply grew apart from his spouse. If you don't tell your side, his version becomes the accepted narrative. She gave me her direct number and told me to call anytime. After hanging up, I immediately called Natalie. Channel 5 contacted me. Kate Sullivan. She knows everything. I know. I sent her the story. Natalie. We talked about this. We agreed to handle this through legal channels. We are handling it through legal channels. But public pressure helps. When people see what Dad did, when they understand how the system failed to protect you, it creates context for why the legal system needs to hold him accountable. This is my life. My medical history. My humiliation. Don't I get a say in whether it becomes a news story? There was a long pause. You're right. I should have asked you first. I'm sorry. The apology caught me off guard. Natalie had been so focused, so driven, that I'd started to see her as this calculating machine. But she was still my daughter, still learning, still capable of recognizing when she'd overstepped. Thank you for saying that. Are you going to do the interview? I thought about Brian, living in his new house, planning his Italian honeymoon, telling people we'd grown apart. I thought about other donors who might be manipulated the same way I was, who might trust someone who was secretly planning to betray them. I think I am. Then I want to be part of it. Not on camera, but in the room. Because you shouldn't have to face this alone. Wednesday afternoon, Kate Sullivan arrived at Gregory Foster's office with a small crew. 2 cameras, a sound technician, Kate herself with a notebook full of prepared questions. They'd set up in the conference room, positioning chairs and lights to create an intimate interview space. Natalie sat in the corner, out of frame, her laptop open. She'd insisted on being there to fact-check anything I said, to make sure I didn't downplay what Brian had done in some misguided attempt to be fair. Kate settled across from me, her expression kind but professional. Mrs. Morrison, thank you for agreeing to speak with us. I know this is difficult. Please, call me Lisa. Lisa, let's start at the beginning. When did your husband first tell you he needed a kidney transplant? I walked her through the timeline. Brian's diagnosis 3 years ago. The deteriorating kidney function. The growing urgency as he climbed the transplant list without success. The testing that revealed I was a perfect match. What did it mean to you, discovering you could save his life? Everything. It felt like fate, like this was why we were together. I could give him more time, more life. It never occurred to me not to do it. Did anyone counsel you about the risks? About the possibility that your relationship might change after such a major medical event? The transplant coordinator at Riverside Medical Center, Diane Kostova, she talked to us about stress on relationships. She said some couples grow closer and some struggle. But she never mentioned the possibility of fraud. No one screened for whether Brian actually intended to stay married after receiving my organ. Kate leaned forward slightly. Tell me about the surgery and recovery. I described waking up in pain, the 6-week recovery period, Brian's attentiveness during those first few weeks. The way he'd brought me water, helped me shower, kissed my surgical scar. He called me his hero, I said, feeling my throat tighten. 2 weeks after surgery, he told me I was the most selfless person he'd ever known. And the whole time, he was planning to leave. How do you know he was planning it? He was having an affair with his physical therapist. The relationship started months before my surgery. They were discussing their future together, planning to buy a house, talking about how to handle me once the transplant was complete. I watched Kate's eyes widen slightly. This was good television. Human tragedy with clear villains. You have evidence of this? Emails, text messages, financial records. He bought a house with my physical therapist using our joint savings as a down payment. He transferred the money while I was still taking prescription pain medication. What was your reaction when he served you divorce papers? I thought it was a mistake. Or a panic attack. Something we could fix. I offered counseling. I asked what I'd done wrong. It took me days to understand that this was premeditated, that he'd been planning it all along. Kate asked about the financial impact, the medical bills, the empty accounts. I laid it out with the clinical detachment I'd learned from watching Natalie discuss the case. The surgery cost me $47,000. Insurance classified it as elective because I chose to donate. Brian promised to cover all my medical expenses. He signed documents at the hospital promising exactly that. But when the bills came, he refused to pay. He said all financial matters would be resolved in divorce proceedings. So you underwent major surgery that left you with permanent physical changes and substantial debt, and the person you did it for immediately abandoned you with no financial support? Yes. Kate sat back, and I could see her processing the moral clarity of the story. This wasn't a complicated divorce where both parties shared blame. This was exploitation. This was fraud. What would you say to other potential living donors who might be watching this? I looked directly at the camera for the first time. Make sure you have everything in writing. Don't rely on trust, even with someone you've been married to for decades. Protect yourself legally before you go into surgery, because once you've donated that organ, you have no leverage. And if something feels wrong, trust that instinct. I ignored red flags because I was so focused on saving his life. I wish I'd paid attention. After the cameras stopped rolling, Kate showed me preliminary footage from interviews she'd already conducted. Medical ethicists calling for better donor protections. Attorneys discussing the legal gray areas around living donor fraud. A transplant coordinator from a different hospital admitting the system has no safeguards against recipient manipulation. This is going to air next Wednesday during the evening news hour, Kate said. 6 p.m., with promoted segments throughout the day. I expect significant viewership. What happens after it airs? Typically, public reaction, social media discussion, sometimes policy attention if the story gains enough traction. Your case is egregious enough that I think it could spark real conversation about donor protection reforms. Natalie walked over after Kate had left, packing up equipment. You did really well, Mom. You stayed calm, you stated facts, you didn't get emotional in a way that people could dismiss. Is that what we're worried about now? Whether people dismiss my emotions? We have to think strategically. If you'd cried on camera, some people would feel sympathetic but others would think you're being manipulative. By staying composed and factual, you denied Dad the ability to claim you're just a vengeful ex-wife. She was right. Everything was strategy now. Every move calculated for maximum impact. Natalie, what happens when your father sees this news story? When he realizes you've been feeding information to journalists and lawyers and anyone who will help destroy him? She closed her laptop and looked at me with those serious eyes that seemed far older than 16. He gets scared. And scared people make mistakes. And when he makes mistakes, we'll be ready to capitalize on them. This doesn't bother you? Systematically dismantling your own father's life? He systematically dismantled yours. He stole your organ through deception, stole your money, abandoned you with debt, and married his mistress in the house he bought with your savings. What bothers me is that he thought he'd get away with it. She picked up her backpack and headed for the door. The news story airs next Wednesday. Gregory files the emergency asset recovery motion on Thursday. By Friday, Dad's going to realize his new life has an expiration date. And there's nothing he can do to stop it. I sat alone in the conference room after everyone had left, thinking about the interview I'd just given. Thinking about my face on television, my story becoming public knowledge. Part of me wanted to call Kate Sullivan and tell her to kill the story, to keep this private, to handle it quietly through the courts. But another part of me, the part that was slowly remembering how to be angry instead of sad, wanted everyone to know what Brian had done. Wanted his colleagues at Westmont Financial to know. Wanted Vanessa's family to know. Wanted every person who'd ever trusted him to understand exactly what kind of man he was. He'd stolen my kidney. He'd stolen my money. He'd stolen my future. Maybe it was time the world knew about it. The call came at 6:43 in the morning. My phone vibrated against the nightstand, pulling me from restless sleep. Brian's name flashed across the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering, my heart hammering against my ribs. Lisa. His voice was tight, controlled in a way that told me he was barely holding himself together. We need to talk. Right now. About what? About whatever the hell you think you're doing. I just got served with an emergency motion to freeze all my assets. My bank accounts are locked. I can't access the house equity. My lawyer says you're claiming fraud. I sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around myself like armor. Natalie must have heard my phone because I saw her light click on down the hall. Your assets? You mean our assets? The ones you stole while I was recovering from donating my kidney to you. I didn't steal anything. We were married. I had every right to manage our finances. Manage? Is that what you call emptying every account we had and using the money to buy a house with your mistress? The silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted from angry to calculating. What do you want, Lisa? Money? Fine. I'll agree to pay your medical bills and give you half the savings back. But you need to call off your lawyer and whatever media circus you're planning. Media circus? Don't play stupid. I know you've been talking to reporters. One of Vanessa's friends saw a news van outside Gregory Foster's office last week. What did you do, sell our private life to Channel 5 for sympathy points? Down the hall, I heard Natalie's door open. She appeared in my doorway wearing pajama pants and an oversized Lincoln High sweatshirt, her phone already in her hand, recording. I told the truth, Brian. That's all. I told them exactly what you did. I fell out of love with you. That's not a crime. No, but fraud is. Identity theft is. Donor manipulation is. You solicited an organ donation under false pretenses with premeditated intent to abandon me. That's criminal, Brian. Not just divorce. Criminal. You're insane. You volunteered to donate. Nobody forced you. You let me believe we had a future together. You let me undergo major surgery thinking I was saving our marriage along with your life. You lied to the transplant coordinators about the stability of our relationship. You signed documents promising to support me through recovery and then served me divorce papers 8 weeks post-surgery. That's not falling out of love. That's a con. His breathing got heavier, faster. I could picture him pacing in that expensive house, running his hand through his hair the way he always did when things didn't go his way. Who's feeding you this legal language? Your daughter? Is Natalie behind this? I glanced at Natalie, who nodded once. She wanted him to know. Natalie has been very supportive, yes. Put her on the phone. I want to talk to her. No. She's my daughter, Lisa. I have a right to speak with my own child. You gave up that right when you stole her college fund to buy furniture for your affair partner. That money was mine. That money was in an education trust with both our names on it. You had no legal authority to transfer it, and you know it. Just like you had no authority to use my income information to secure a mortgage without my knowledge. The quality of the silence changed. He knew I had specific information, documentation he thought was private. How do you know about the mortgage application? I know everything, Brian. Every email to Vanessa. Every financial transfer. Every lie you told while I was recovering from surgery. I know about the jewelry you stole from my grandmother. I know about the Italy trip you're planning with my money. I know exactly what you've done. You've been spying on me. That's illegal. Any evidence you gathered that way is inadmissible. Natalie mouthed the words, one-party consent, and held up her phone, reminding me that Oregon law was on our side. I haven't been spying on anyone. But information has a way of surfacing when you commit fraud, Brian. Banks keep records. Courts can subpoena documents. And people talk when they realize they've been helping someone commit crimes. What people? What the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about Diane Kostova at the transplant center. She's cooperating with an investigation into whether you violated donor protection protocols. I'm talking about your mortgage broker, who's very interested in why your loan application numbers don't match the documentation you provided. I'm talking about Westmont Financial's compliance department, who I'm told is conducting an internal review of your client accounts. That last part was speculation based on what Gregory had mentioned might happen, but Brian didn't need to know that. His sharp intake of breath told me the hit had landed. You're trying to destroy my career. My reputation. Everything I've built. I'm trying to get justice for what you did to me. If your career and reputation can't survive people knowing the truth about your character, maybe you should have made better choices. I gave you 19 years, Lisa. I gave you a home, a family, stability. So I made mistakes at the end. So I handled things badly. Does that really justify trying to ruin my entire life? The audacity of it, the complete lack of self-awareness, took my breath away. You didn't make mistakes, Brian. You executed a plan. You manipulated me into giving you an organ while secretly planning to abandon me with debt. You stole from your own daughter. You defrauded lenders. These aren't mistakes. These are crimes. And yes, I believe people who commit crimes should face consequences. Fine. You want a war? We'll have a war. But I'm warning you right now, you're not going to win. I have resources. I have lawyers who make Gregory Foster look like a public defender. And I will drag this out until you've spent every penny you have left fighting me. Good luck with that. Your assets are frozen, remember? How exactly are you planning to pay these expensive lawyers? The line went dead. He'd hung up on me. Natalie stopped recording and came to sit on the edge of my bed. That was perfect, Mom. He admitted to the mortgage fraud. He acknowledged taking my college fund. And he threatened you, which shows consciousness of guilt. He's going to fight back hard now. He's scared. Good. Scared people make sloppy mistakes. She forwarded the recording to Gregory Foster's email before I could even process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian, sent to both Natalie and me in a group message. Family meeting. Tonight at 7. The house on Elm Creek. Both of you need to be there. We're settling this like adults. I showed Natalie the message. She read it and smiled in a way that made her look far older than 16. He wants us in his territory. He thinks he can control the narrative if he gets us face to face without lawyers present. Are we going? Absolutely. I want to see him try to explain himself. Plus, Oregon is one-party consent. Everything he says can be recorded and used in court. This feels dangerous. Only for him. We arrived at our old house just before 7. Brian's BMW was already in the driveway, along with Vanessa's Range Rover. The sight of her car at my house, in the driveway where I used to park, made something twist in my chest. Natalie had dressed carefully for this meeting. Neat jeans, a button-down shirt, hair pulled back. She looked mature, serious, like someone who should be taken seriously. She'd clipped a small recording device to her collar, barely visible but picking up audio clearly. Brian opened the door before we could knock. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair uncombed, his shirt wrinkled. This wasn't the put-together man who'd walked out 8 weeks ago. This was someone unraveling. Come in. The house felt wrong. Different furniture, different art on the walls, even the smell was different. Vanessa had erased me from my own home in less than 2 months. Vanessa herself sat on a new leather couch in the living room, looking uncomfortable. She stood when we entered, offering a hesitant smile that died when she saw our expressions. Lisa, Natalie. Thanks for coming. I know this is awkward, but I think if we all just sit down and talk like reasonable people, we can figure this out. Reasonable people don't steal kidneys and life savings, I said, remaining standing. Brian gestured sharply. Sit down. Both of you. We're not doing this standing in the doorway like we're strangers. We are strangers, Natalie said calmly. You made sure of that when you chose to become someone we don't recognize. Natalie, please. Vanessa's voice had a pleading quality. Your father loves you very much. This doesn't have to be a war. My father stole $62,000 from my college fund to buy this house with you. That feels like war to me. Brian's face flushed red. That money was always going to go to your education. I just moved it temporarily to make a smart investment. This house is appreciating at 7% annually. Your college fund would have earned maybe 3% in the bank. So you admit you took it without permission? Natalie pulled out her phone, opening a notes app. You're acknowledging that you unilaterally transferred funds from a joint education trust? I'm not acknowledging anything. Put that phone away. Why? Are you worried about being recorded saying true things about what you did? Brian lunged forward and tried to grab Natalie's phone. She jerked back, but he managed to knock it from her hand. It clattered across the hardwood floor, sliding under the new couch. Don't you ever record me without my permission. Do you understand? I'm your father and I deserve basic respect. I stepped between them, my heart pounding. Don't you dare touch her. Don't you dare try to intimidate your own daughter because she's documenting the truth. The truth? You want to talk about truth? Fine. Here's some truth for you, Lisa. I stayed in a dead marriage for 3 years because I was sick. Because I needed stability and insurance and someone to take care of me. Yes, I should have been honest about my feelings. Yes, I should have left before asking for your kidney. But I was dying. I was terrified. And I made survival choices. Survival choices? Is that what you call systematically planning to defraud me? I call it doing what I had to do to live. You want to paint me as some monster, but the reality is I was desperate and scared and I made imperfect decisions in an impossible situation. Vanessa stood up, moving closer to Brian. He's not a monster. He's a good man who was in an untenable position. Yes, the timing was bad. Yes, he should have communicated better. But he doesn't deserve to have his entire life destroyed because his marriage ended. His marriage didn't end, I said, my voice shaking. He ended it. 2 months after I gave him my kidney. After I went through surgery and recovery and 6 weeks of pain to save his life. He didn't just leave a marriage. He executed a plan to take everything and disappear. I didn't disappear. I moved 20 minutes away. I've asked Natalie to visit multiple times. I want a relationship with my daughter. You want a relationship? Natalie's voice cut through the room like a blade. You want to take me to dinner and show me your new house and pretend we're a normal family? While mom is working double shifts to pay medical bills you promised to cover? While I'm applying for scholarships because you stole my college fund? You want a relationship built on that foundation? I made mistakes. I'm trying to make things right. By fighting every legal motion we file? By threatening mom with expensive litigation? By freezing her out of assets you acquired during the marriage? That's not making things right. That's trying to win. Brian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. What do you want from me? You want me to say I'm sorry? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry the timing was bad. I'm sorry I hurt you both. But I'm not sorry for choosing my own happiness. I spent 3 years thinking I was going to die. When I survived, when I got healthy again, I realized I had a chance at a real life. A life where I wasn't just existing, but actually living. And I took it. At our expense, I said quietly. You took your chance at happiness by stealing ours. You'll be fine. You're strong, you're capable, you have a job and a support system. Natalie's a brilliant kid who'll get scholarships. You're acting like I left you destitute when the reality is you're both going to be fine. I have $47,000 in medical debt because of you. Our savings is gone because of you. Natalie's college fund is gone because of you. The equity in this house, the house I lived in for 15 years, is being used to fund your new life. How exactly is that fine? I'll pay you back. Eventually. When the legal fees calm down and we can actually settle this rationally, I'll make sure you're compensated fairly. Eventually? Rationally? Gregory Foster's voice came from behind us. We all turned to see him standing in the still open front door, holding a thick folder of documents. Mr. Morrison, I'm Gregory Foster. I represent Lisa in the divorce proceedings. I couldn't help but overhear your admission that you plan to delay financial restitution indefinitely. Brian's face went pale. What are you doing here? This is a private family meeting. Your ex-wife texted me the address in case the meeting became hostile. Given that I just witnessed you physically lunge at your daughter and attempt to destroy her recording device, I'd say her concerns were valid. Gregory walked into the living room like he owned it, setting his folder on the coffee table. Vanessa Hartley, I presume? I have some questions for you as well regarding your knowledge of asset transfers and mortgage fraud. Vanessa looked at Brian in panic. I don't have to talk to him, do I? Not without your own lawyer present, no, Gregory said pleasantly. But I'll be deposing you under oath within the next 2 weeks, so you might want to start thinking about your answers. Get out of my house, Brian said, his voice low and dangerous. Your house? Interesting. According to county records, this property is jointly owned with Ms. Hartley here, purchased using funds transferred from accounts in Lisa Morrison's name. I'd argue this is partially Lisa's house, which means I have every right to be here. Brian moved toward Gregory, aggression clear in his posture. Natalie immediately stepped forward, phone up and recording everything. Dad, stop. If you assault Mom's lawyer, that's criminal. Everything you do right now is being documented. He froze, looking at his daughter with something like hatred. You. This is all you. You poisoned your mother against me. You built this case. You contacted reporters and lawyers and God knows who else. My own daughter destroyed my life. No, Dad. You destroyed your own life when you decided to steal Mom's kidney and then abandon her. I just made sure everyone found out about it. The words hung in the air between them. Father and daughter, staring at each other across an unbridgeable divide. I want you out of my house. All of you. Now. Gladly, I said, moving toward the door. But before I go, I want you to know that the news story airs tomorrow night. Channel 5, 6 p.m. Kate Sullivan's been working on it for weeks. By Thursday morning, everyone you know will understand exactly what you did. You put our private life on television? Are you insane? I told the truth about living donor fraud. About what happens when someone manipulates a person they claim to love into giving them an organ. If that embarrasses you, maybe you should have thought about that before you did it. Vanessa let out a small sob. Brian, this is going to be on the news? My family is going to see this? My father is going to know about us? Your father already knows, Natalie said. Kate Sullivan interviewed him last week. He had some very interesting things to say about his daughter's involvement with a married man. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Brian looked at her, then back at us, and I saw the moment he realized how thoroughly his new life was about to implode. You contacted her father? You dragged her family into this? I didn't drag anyone anywhere. Kate Sullivan is a journalist who does thorough research. She talks to everyone involved in a story. That's what good reporting looks like. Gregory picked up his folder and moved toward the door. Mr. Morrison, you'll be receiving additional legal filings tomorrow morning. I strongly suggest you retain counsel who specializes in fraud defense. The civil case is just the beginning. The district attorney's office has expressed significant interest in the criminal aspects of your behavior. We left them standing in the living room of the house Brian had bought with my savings. As we walked to our cars, I felt Natalie slip her hand into mine. That went better than expected, she said quietly. How is that better than expected? Your father tried to grab your phone. Exactly. He lost control. He made threats. He showed exactly who he is in front of a witness. Gregory recorded the whole thing. Tomorrow, that recording goes to the judge along with our emergency motions. I looked at my daughter, this person who'd learned to weaponize the truth with devastating precision. Are you okay? Seeing him like that, having him look at you with so much anger? She was quiet for a moment, then squeezed my hand. I'm sad that he chose to be someone I have to fight against instead of someone who protects me. But I'm not going to let that sadness stop me from making sure there are consequences. As we drove away from Elm Creek Drive, I watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror. Tomorrow, the news story would air. The next day, Brian's world would start crumbling. And somewhere in the middle of all this destruction, maybe we'd find a way to rebuild something better from the wreckage he'd left behind. The morning of the broadcast, I woke up with my stomach in knots. By evening, my story would be public knowledge. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, strangers across the state would know the most painful details of my life. Would know that I'd been foolish enough to trust a man who'd been planning to betray me. Would know that I'd literally given part of my body to someone who saw me as disposable. Paula arrived at 8 with coffee and pastries from Cedar Grove Cafe. She found me pacing the apartment, unable to sit still. "You're doing the right thing," she said, pressing a latte into my hands. "Other people need to hear this. Other donors need to know they're not alone. What if people think I'm just a bitter ex-wife? What if they side with him? Then those people are idiots. Anyone with half a brain can see what he did was predatory." Chris called from Salem around noon, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. She'd driven up to watch the broadcast with us, refusing to let me face it alone. "I've been calling Brian all morning," she said. "Straight to voicemail. He's either ignoring everyone or he's already left town. He can't leave town. His assets are frozen." "Since when has that stopped a desperate man?" Natalie emerged from her room around 3, looking exhausted. She'd been up most of the night preparing what she called her contingency files, additional evidence packages ready to deploy depending on Brian's response to the broadcast. "Kate Sullivan's team has been promoting the story all day," Natalie said, showing me her phone. "It's trending on local social media. People are already talking about it." I scrolled through comments from people I'd never met, strangers weighing in on my life. Some were supportive. Others were skeptical. A few were cruel in ways that made my hands shake. "Stop reading those," Paula said, taking my phone. "Internet comments are where empathy goes to die." At 5:30, Gregory Foster called with an update. "The judge reviewed the recordings from last night's confrontation. She's granting our emergency motion for immediate asset recovery. Brian has to return the $93,000 he transferred within 30 days, plus your $47,000 in medical expenses. She's also ordering him to restore Natalie's college fund in full." 30 days? How is he supposed to do that with frozen accounts? That's his problem to solve. He can liquidate other assets, take out personal loans, whatever he needs to do. But the judge was clear that his cash flow issues don't negate his obligation to restore what he stole. What about the house? That's more complicated. Vanessa is on the deed, and she's claiming she had no knowledge of the fraudulent transfers. We'll need to prove she knew the down payment came from stolen marital funds. That's going to take time. After hanging up, I tried Brian's number one more time. It rang through to voicemail. His outgoing message was still the cheerful greeting he'd recorded years ago, back when we were happy. Back when I thought I knew him. "Brian, it's Lisa. The news story airs in 20 minutes. I wanted you to hear this from me first. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because what you did was wrong, and people need to know that this kind of manipulation happens. That donors need protection. I hope someday you'll understand that." I ended the call knowing he'd never listened to the message. Knowing he'd already cast me as the villain in whatever story he was telling himself. At 6 o'clock, we gathered in my small living room. Me, Natalie, Paula, Chris. The opening credits of Channel 5 News played across the screen. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. Kate Sullivan's face appeared, serious and professional. "Tonight, we begin a special investigation into a troubling gap in our organ donation system. What happens when someone uses love and trust to manipulate a living donor into giving them an organ, only to abandon them immediately after surgery?" We spoke with one local woman whose experience reveals how vulnerable donors can be to exploitation. The screen cut to my interview, my face pixelated for privacy, my voice slightly altered. But anyone who knew me would recognize my mannerisms, my speech patterns. "I thought I was saving my husband's life and our marriage," my altered voice said. "I had no idea I was being used." Kate's report was devastating in its thoroughness. She'd obtained hospital records showing Brian had told transplant coordinators our marriage was stable. She'd interviewed Diane Kostova, who admitted the screening process doesn't evaluate recipient intent or relationship authenticity. She'd spoken with medical ethicists who called Brian's behavior morally unconscionable and potentially criminal. The bombshell came 15 minutes into the segment. Kate had tracked down 2 other women from different states who'd donated kidneys to partners who'd left them within months of surgery. The pattern was identical. Manipulation, false promises, immediate abandonment, financial devastation. Living donor fraud may be more common than we think, Kate said directly to camera. But because there's no systematic tracking and minimal legal framework, these cases often go unreported. Donors suffer in silence, blamed for failed relationships when they're actually victims of calculated exploitation. The segment ended with Kate's call to action. Contact information for the State Medical Board. Resources for donors who suspected fraud. A legislative proposal to create donor protection protocols. My phone started ringing immediately. Unknown numbers, friends I hadn't spoken to in months, distant relatives. I let them all go to voicemail except one. Mr. Richard Webb from Lincoln High School, Natalie's guidance counselor. Mrs. Morrison, I just watched the news. I had no idea what your family had been through. I'm calling because I think Natalie might benefit from speaking with our school counselor. What she's experienced, what she's witnessed, that's traumatic for a young person. Natalie's been seeing a therapist. Dr. Angela Brennan. That's good. I'm glad she has support. But I want you to know that the school is here for both of you. If Natalie needs accommodations, if she's struggling academically or emotionally, we want to help. After we hung up, I looked at Natalie. She was scrolling through social media reactions, her face unreadable. Mr. Webb thinks you need counseling. I'm already in counseling. Are you okay? Really okay? She set down her phone and met my eyes. I'm angry that I had to become this person. I'm angry that Dad made choices that forced me to learn about fraud and legal strategy and how to document evidence. I should be worrying about SATs and college applications, not fighting my own father in court. Her voice cracked slightly. But I'm not sorry I did it. Because someone had to protect you, and it clearly wasn't going to be him. Chris pulled Natalie into a hug, and my daughter finally cried. Not the silent tears she'd shed a few times over the past weeks, but real sobs that shook her whole body. All the strength she'd been performing, all the calculated competence, it cracked open, and underneath was still my child who'd watched her father destroy her mother and had to grow up too fast in response. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. This is Vanessa. I need to talk to you. Please. It's important. I showed the text to Natalie, who wiped her eyes and immediately shifted back into strategic mode. Don't respond yet. Let her sweat for a while. She's panicking because the news story made her complicit in fraud. What if she has information we need? Then she'll still have it in an hour. Make her wait. At 7:30, I finally responded. What do you want to talk about? The reply came within seconds. Can we meet? Somewhere public? I have things you need to know about Brian. We agreed on Cedar Grove Cafe at 8. I insisted Natalie stay home with Chris and Paula, but she refused. If Vanessa's flipping on Dad, I need to hear it directly. I need to assess whether she's credible or just trying to save herself. Vanessa was already there when we arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she clearly wasn't drinking. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, eyes red from crying. Thank you for meeting me, she said as we sat down. I know you have no reason to trust me. You're right. I don't. Vanessa took a shaky breath. I watched the news tonight. I heard those other women talking about what happened to them. And I realized I've been telling myself a story that isn't true. What story is that? That Brian left you because he fell in love with me. That it was organic and natural and just one of those things that happen. But that's not what happened, is it? She looked at me with something like desperation. He planned it. All of it. The affair, the financial transfers, the house purchase. He told me you two had been separated for over a year before your surgery. He said the kidney donation was your way of saying goodbye, giving him a gift before you both moved on. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. You never questioned why a woman would donate a kidney to her supposedly estranged husband? He said you were still friends. That you both wanted the divorce to be amicable. God, I was so stupid. Natalie leaned forward. When did you realize he was lying? Tonight. After the broadcast, I confronted him. I asked him point blank if he'd manipulated Lisa into the donation. He didn't deny it. He said he did what he had to do to survive, that I'd understand someday when I was in an impossible situation. Vanessa's hands trembled around her cup. Then he said something that made me realize I'm not his partner. I'm his next mark. What did he say? He said, women like you are easy to manage. You're young enough to think you can fix me and grateful enough for the attention that you won't ask hard questions. He said it like it was a compliment. Like I should be flattered he chose me. I watched emotions play across her face. Humiliation, anger, fear. I've been paying all the household expenses since we moved in together. My credit cards are maxed out. He said it was temporary, that once the legal issues settled he'd cover everything. But there are no legal issues settling, are there? He's not going to suddenly have access to money. He stole it all and spent it, and now I'm left covering the bills for a house I can't afford. Why are you telling us this? Natalie asked. Because I need your help. My name is on that house deed. If Brian goes down for fraud, I'm going down with him unless I can prove I didn't know where the money came from. And did you know? Not at first. But I found documents a few weeks ago. Bank statements showing transfers from accounts with Lisa's name. I asked Brian about it and he said it was complicated, that the money was his but the accounts were joint for tax reasons. I wanted to believe him so I didn't push. She pulled papers from her purse and laid them on the table. Bank records, emails, text messages. This is everything I have that proves Brian lied to me about the source of the down payment. He told me he'd saved the money from a work bonus. These documents show the transfers came from joint accounts he emptied without authorization. Natalie picked up the papers, scanning them quickly. Her eyes widened. These are dated before the house purchase. You knew the money came from Mom's accounts and you said nothing? I knew the account names, but Brian told me they were his accounts. I didn't realize Lisa was still on them. I didn't know he'd transferred them without permission. You're a physical therapist. You're not stupid. You knew something was wrong. Vanessa's face crumpled. I knew I was helping him hurt someone. I just didn't want to admit it because admitting it meant admitting I was complicit. That I was part of something cruel. I studied her across the table. She looked genuinely distraught, but Natalie was right. She'd known enough to ask questions and had chosen not to. What do you want from us? I want to cooperate with your lawyer. I want to testify about what Brian told me, about how he misrepresented the financial situation. In exchange, I want help proving I was deceived, that I'm a victim in this too. You're not a victim, I said quietly. You're a participant who got in over your head. There's a difference. I know. I know I made terrible choices. But I'm trying to make it right now. Natalie pulled out her phone. I'm calling Gregory Foster. If you're serious about cooperating, you need to make a formal statement. Tonight. We spent 3 hours at Gregory's office while Vanessa gave her deposition. She admitted to the affair, to knowing Brian was still married during the early stages of their relationship, to suspecting the financial transfers weren't entirely legitimate. She provided documentation showing Brian had lied to her about multiple aspects of his finances and legal situation. This is helpful, Gregory said after Vanessa left. Her testimony undermines Brian's credibility and provides evidence of his pattern of deception. The fact that he lied to her the same way he lied to you strengthens our fraud case. What happens to her? Legally? Probably nothing criminal. She'll lose the house eventually when we prove the down payment came from fraudulent transfers. Her credit will be destroyed. But she's smart enough to distance herself from Brian before he drags her down completely. On the drive home, Natalie was quiet. When we pulled into our apartment complex parking lot, she finally spoke. Do you feel bad for her, Vanessa? I thought about it carefully. I feel bad that she got manipulated. But I also think she made choices with her eyes at least partially open. She wanted to believe Brian's lies because the truth would have been inconvenient. That's what I think too. She's not evil. She's just weak. We've all been weak, honey. I was weak when I ignored red flags before the surgery. I wanted to believe in us so badly that I dismissed my own instincts. That's different. You were his wife. You had history and trust. She was his mistress. She should have asked harder questions. We sat in the car for a few more minutes, neither of us ready to go inside. Mom, can I ask you something? Always. Do you wish you hadn't donated? If you could go back and refuse, would you? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it honestly. I wish I'd protected myself better. I wish I'd demanded legal agreements about financial support and had everything in writing. But the donation itself? No. I don't regret saving his life, even though he doesn't deserve it. Because that choice says something about who I am, not who he is. You're a better person than me. If I'd known what he was planning, I would have let him die. No, you wouldn't have. Because you're not capable of that kind of cruelty, even towards someone who deserves it. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in the dark parking lot, processing everything that had happened. The next morning, Brian's employer called me. Stephen Chen, the managing partner at Westmont Financial Group. Mrs. Morrison, I'm calling to inform you that Brian Morrison's employment has been terminated effective immediately. Our internal investigation revealed multiple ethics violations and breaches of client trust. What kind of violations? I can't discuss specifics, but I can tell you that your daughter's anonymous report to our compliance department prompted an audit that uncovered significant irregularities. Mr. Morrison will not be receiving any severance package or continued benefits. After hanging up, I found Natalie in her room doing homework. You reported your father to his employer? I reported evidence of financial impropriety to the appropriate authorities. What they chose to do with that information was their decision. When did you do this? 3 weeks ago. I figured if we were going to dismantle his life, we should be thorough. She said it so matter-of-factly, like she'd just described turning in a school project. Natalie, this is huge. He's lost his income, his assets are frozen, his reputation is destroyed. What's he going to do? Figure it out, I guess. The same way Mom had to figure out how to pay medical bills he promised to cover. The same way I had to figure out how to fund my own college education after he stole my savings. She looked up from her textbook. He made choices that had consequences, Mom. All I did was make sure those consequences actually happened instead of letting him walk away clean. Over the next 3 weeks, Brian's world continued collapsing. The state medical board opened a formal investigation into whether he'd violated donor protection guidelines. The district attorney's office announced they were reviewing potential fraud charges. His photo appeared in local news stories about living donor exploitation. The house went into foreclosure when Brian couldn't make mortgage payments without his salary or access to frozen assets. Vanessa moved back in with her parents, her engagement ring from Brian listed on resale websites. Gregory negotiated a settlement that gave us everything. Full restitution of medical expenses. Return of all transferred funds. Natalie's college fund restored with penalty interest. Half the equity in the house once it's sold. Permanent alimony based on the fraud conviction. He's facing potential criminal charges, Gregory explained. His lawyers advised him to settle the civil case as favorably as possible to show the DA he's taking responsibility. Honestly, you could have pushed for more. But this gives you financial security, covers all damages, and you can move forward. The settlement came through in April, 4 months after Brian had walked out. I paid off my medical debt, replenished our emergency savings, and still had enough left over to put a down payment on a small house in the Maplewood district. Natalie's college applications went out with a personal essay about learning to protect vulnerable people and systems that fail them. She got early acceptance to 3 universities with full academic scholarships. She was planning to major in law with a focus on medical ethics. Dr. Brennan, Natalie's therapist, called me in for a joint session in May. I wanted to discuss Natalie's emotional development over the past several months. She's made remarkable progress in processing the trauma, but I have some concerns. What kind of concerns? Natalie has developed a very black and white view of justice. People are either victims or perpetrators, and perpetrators deserve whatever consequences befall them. That's understandable given what she experienced, but it's also limiting. Real life has more nuance than that. I looked at Natalie, who sat calmly listening to this assessment of her worldview. The world has victims and people who victimize them, Natalie said. Pretending there's nuance just gives perpetrators room to excuse their behavior. But don't you think people can make mistakes and still deserve forgiveness? Dr. Brennan asked gently. Mistakes are accidents. What Dad did was planned, deliberate, sustained over months. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And choices have consequences. What about you, Natalie? Do you think the choices you made, the surveillance, the investigations, the systematic destruction of your father's life, do those choices have consequences too? Natalie was quiet for a long moment. Yes. The consequence is I'll never be naive again. I'll never trust people the way I used to. I'll always be looking for evidence that someone's lying to me. That's the price I paid for protecting my mother. And is that price worth it? Absolutely. Because the alternative was watching him destroy her and doing nothing. After the session, we stopped for ice cream at a place near Willow Ridge Park. Natalie got her usual mint chocolate chip, and we sat on a bench watching kids play on the swings. Do you think I'm damaged? She asked suddenly. The way Dr. Brennan talks about me, it sounds like she thinks I'm broken. I think you're changed. We're both changed. But changed doesn't mean damaged. Dad called me last week. I turned to stare at her. What? When? Tuesday night. From a number I didn't recognize. He wanted to know if I'd be willing to testify on his behalf if the DA files criminal charges. What did you say? I told him I'd testify truthfully about everything I witnessed. That if the truth helps him, great. If it doesn't, that's not my problem. She took a bite of ice cream, watching the playground. He started crying on the phone. Told me he was living in a motel, working as a bookkeeper for a small firm that doesn't do background checks. He said I destroyed his life and he hopes someday I understand what it feels like to lose everything. How did that make you feel? Nothing. I felt nothing. That's what worries me sometimes, Mom. That I turned off the part of me that feels sympathy for people who are suffering. Even when the person suffering is my own father. I pulled her close. You feel sympathy for people who deserve it. Your father made calculated choices to hurt people who loved him. Feeling nothing about his consequences isn't cruel. It's appropriate. Dr. Brennan says I need to work on forgiveness. Maybe. Eventually. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It just means letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison you. And you're allowed to take as long as you need with that. We finished our ice cream in comfortable silence. 2 women who'd survived betrayal and come out stronger, sitting in the spring sunshine, building a future that belonged entirely to us. A month later, Kate Sullivan's investigative series won a regional journalism award. The story had sparked legislative action, with Oregon proposing new donor protection protocols and mandatory relationship stability assessments before living donation approval. Kate invited us to a ceremony honoring donors who'd spoken out about exploitation. 3 other women attended, all with stories similar to mine. We formed a quiet support network, meeting monthly to discuss recovery, rebuilding, and how to prevent others from experiencing what we had. One woman, Teresa, had donated a kidney to her brother who'd then cut her out of his life entirely. Another, Kim, had donated to her husband who'd left her for her best friend. The third, Nicole, had donated to her son who'd then sued her for elder abuse when she asked to live with him during recovery. The common thread, Kate said during one of our meetings, is that people saw donors as resources to be extracted rather than human beings to be valued. The donation created a power imbalance that the recipients exploited. How do we fix that? Teresa asked. How do we protect future donors from being used? Better screening. Mandatory counseling. Legal protections. But also cultural change. We need to stop treating living donors as heroes and start treating them as vulnerable people engaging in risky altruism. The hero narrative makes it harder for donors to ask for protection or admit they're being exploited. That conversation stayed with me. I had wanted to be Brian's hero. I'd wanted the donation to prove my love, to cement our bond, to be the ultimate act of devotion. That hero narrative had made me blind to the warning signs that he was preparing to betray me. In June, Natalie graduated from Lincoln High School with highest honors. At the ceremony, Mr. Webb presented her with a special award for courage in adversity. She accepted it with grace, giving a brief speech about how trauma can either break you or forge you into something stronger. A year ago, my family fell apart, she told the assembled graduates and parents. My father made choices that shattered my sense of safety and trust. I could have let that destroy me. Instead, I learned that when systems fail to protect vulnerable people, individuals have to step up. I learned that justice doesn't happen automatically. It requires action, evidence, and persistence. She looked directly at me in the audience. I learned that being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means feeling the pain and choosing to build something better anyway. My mother taught me that. She gave a kidney to someone who didn't deserve it, and when he betrayed her, she didn't collapse. She fought back. She told her story. She helped change laws so other donors would have more protection. Natalie held up her award. This isn't for surviving adversity. It's for choosing to transform pain into purpose. And that's what I'm going to keep doing. The applause was thunderous. Later, in the parking lot, parents I barely knew came up to hug me, to thank me for speaking out, to tell me their own stories of betrayal and recovery. We moved into our new house in July. It was smaller than the place on Elm Creek Drive, but it was ours. Bought with settlement money, filled with furniture we chose together, full of possibilities instead of ghosts. Natalie set up her room with the same meticulous organization she'd used to build the case against her father. But now, instead of evidence folders, her walls displayed college acceptance letters, scholarship awards, and a photo of us at her graduation. "Mom," she called from her room one evening. "Can you come here for a second?" I found her sitting at her desk with her laptop open. On the screen was a website design, clean and professional. "I'm starting something. A nonprofit that helps donors navigate exploitation situations. Legal resources, counseling referrals, advocacy support. I'm calling it Second Chances, because donors deserve a second chance at life after giving someone else one." "Natalie, this is incredible. I've been working with Gregory on the legal structure. Kate Sullivan's helping with media outreach. Dr. Brennan's connecting me with therapists who specialize in medical trauma. And Teresa, Kim, and Nicole want to be on the advisory board." She turned to face me. "Dad took something from us. But we're building something bigger from what's left. We're making sure his betrayal means something." I hugged her tightly, this remarkable person who'd grown from my fierce protector into an advocate for others. "I'm so proud of you. I learned from the best." In August, the district attorney decided not to file criminal charges against Brian. The evidence was strong, but Oregon's legal framework around living donor fraud remained unclear. The DA's office didn't want to risk losing a precedent-setting case. "It's frustrating," Gregory admitted. "But the civil case precedent we set is almost as valuable. Future donors can point to your settlement as proof that fraud has consequences even when criminal prosecution isn't viable. Brian disappeared after the decision not to prosecute. He left Oregon entirely, Vanessa told me during one of our occasional check-ins. She'd heard through mutual friends that he'd moved to Arizona, changed his name, and was working under the table to avoid wage garnishment for the settlement payments he still owed. Do you care? Paula asked me one evening over wine on my new patio. That he got away with it, at least criminally? I thought about it carefully. He didn't get away with it. He lost his career, his reputation, his family, his home, everything he valued. He's living under a different name in a different state, hiding from his own choices. That's not getting away with it. That's a different kind of prison. But he's not in actual prison. No. But I'm not in prison either. For months after he left, I felt trapped in grief and betrayal and debt. Now I'm free. I have my house, my daughter, my work with other donors. He gave me a kidney, and I gave him consequences. I think I got the better deal. Natalie left for university in September. She'd chosen a school 3 hours away, close enough to visit but far enough to build her own life. I helped her move into her dorm, meeting her roommate and touring the campus. Are you going to be okay without me? She asked as I prepared to leave. I'm going to miss you terribly. But yes, I'll be okay. You know you can call me anytime, right? If you need anything, if you're struggling, if Dad tries to contact you. I know. But Natalie, you don't have to protect me anymore. You can just be a college student. Study hard, make friends, have experiences that have nothing to do with legal cases or donor fraud. I'll try. But protecting you kinda became part of my identity. Then make helping other people part of your identity instead. You've built something important with second chances. That's your mission now, not me. She hugged me fiercely. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. More than any kidney, more than any settlement, more than anything in this world. Driving home alone, I cried. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming pride and gratitude. My daughter had saved me when I couldn't save myself. And in doing so, she discovered her own strength, her own purpose, her own extraordinary capacity for justice. A year after Brian left, I returned to Riverside Medical Center for a follow-up appointment. My remaining kidney was functioning perfectly. The surgeon pronounced me healthy and cleared me for all normal activities. Diane Kostova, the transplant coordinator, asked to speak with me after the appointment. I wanted you to know that your case changed our protocols. We now require independent counseling for all living donors, with specific screening for relationship coercion and financial pressure. We verify relationship stability through third-party sources, not just donor self-reporting. And we have mandatory legal consultations where donors are advised to get financial protections in writing before surgery. That's wonderful. But it won't prevent all cases of fraud. No. But it makes it harder. It gives donors more information and more protection. Because of you, because you spoke out, future donors will be safer. That evening, I wrote in the journal Dr. Brennan had suggested I keep. I wrote about the kidney I'd given away and the life I'd built from what remained. I wrote about the daughter who'd become my protector and the community of survivors who'd become my friends. I wrote about the man who'd betrayed me and how little space he occupied in my thoughts anymore. Brian took my kidney, I wrote. But I took back my power. He thought the donation made me weak, vulnerable, easy to discard. Instead, it showed me exactly what I was capable of surviving. And in surviving, I learned that strength isn't about never being hurt. It's about what you build after someone tries to break you. I closed the journal and looked around my small living room. Photos of Natalie at graduation. Cards from other donors thanking me for speaking out. A framed certificate from the state legislature recognizing my advocacy for donor protection laws. Brian had given me a kidney that failed within 3 years of transplant, requiring him to need a replacement. I'd given him a kidney that would likely function for decades, extending his life by years he didn't deserve. But more importantly, I'd given him something else he never expected. Consequences. And in fighting for those consequences, I discovered something about myself. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. More resilient. More capable. The kidney was just an organ. But the fight to be seen, valued, and protected as a human being rather than a resource? That fight had transformed me into someone I was proud to be. Someone who would spend the rest of her life making sure other donors never had to fight alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.